Hi everyone. This is my most important video so far, so please consider what I have to say. Nikola Tesla, a hero or menace? Is Tesla a hero to you or a problem, like the Japanese nuclear leak that we have to clean up? As one who for a long time promoted Tesla, I want to share why after years of research, I've slowly changed my mind about him and his work. I do not claim to know everything about him or have this entire subject figured out. I'm in the middle of writing a book where this will be a small part, but it relates to the entire theme of the book. This will be expanded when the book is finished, but I need to share with everyone my immediate concern about Tesla that I urge everyone who does scientific experimentation to consider. And no, this is not about conflicts with Edison or others or about conspiracies. It's really not about what others have covered as far as I have found. For those of you who do not know my research and how it relates to this, I will briefly state that one of the things I do is show people how normally discarded electrical processes can be redirected to significantly charge up batteries and power other useful loads. So for example, we take a brushless DC fan and make a few very minor changes to it that allow for a battery to be charged at the same time, same rate as the battery powering the motor, while continuing to run the same mechanical load as before. How come you weren't taught that in school? See the link in the description to watch a video showing how to do that. So let us start with some known things and move towards my concerns that are lesser known. First, I want to break the ice a bit by starting off slowly with something that you may find more of a curiosity than a concern. It still relates, so bear with me as we move forward in this. Did you ever wonder why electronics devices, such as this, have such a short life, especially those made in the last 20 years? The answer is not always in the quality of the product, but the absence of lead in the circuitry that was formerly used to prevent tiny metal whisker growth between traces or electronic parts. While Wikipedia tells us this is caused from stresses, others say now it's from electric fields, which I've been saying for a long time. Metal whiskers wreak havoc in electronics. This is the quote. But their origin has remained unknown. Now Karpov has said he has what may be a better theory. According to his idea, which he published last week in the journal Physical Review Applied, whiskers do not sprout directly from mechanical stress, but from electric fields created by the metal itself. End quote. Now, this is a concern for any electronics company, especially for those working with high voltage discharging. In my company, we don't work with, except for research, high voltage. We work with low voltage and relatively low frequency. Not low frequency, but much lower than Tesla coils. We consider what happens when Tesla coils are activated. When we consider that, we can observe remote arcing between metal objects. Conventional science does not really explore these sort of things, as can be seen in this whole thing being a relative mystery. I was recently exploring a state-of-the-art electronics facility that produced specialized military products. And for some reason or other, we got talking about this, and the engineer mentioned that they were just talking about this amongst each other and did not really understand why this happens. And I had just been talking to my friend that I brought with me about it too. I attempted to explain what I understood about the subjects along similar lines to the above article. With any pulsing electronics, which is unavoidable, we create an opportunity for this to happen because the pulsing affects the whole environment, the whole local environment, even if it is isolated. Not only can you have streamers in extreme cases, but you can also have this growth. Now, I do not claim here that this is the only cause, but it's fairly clear that just as power can remotely pass without induction to cause arcing in a distance, so can this kind of so it can cause this kind of growth. Not the end of the world, and there are ways to reduce this. I mention this because I wanted to start off with dangers to our circuits before I got into dangers to living organisms. Tesla high voltage and high frequency systems are especially destructive to electronics in these ways. Modern electronics. They're really not compatible and should be relatively far away depending on the power and voltage levels. And you really can't block out the signals generated other than creating receivers, or as I've imagined, using the pancake bifilar coil, which is another Tesla device. Faraday cages do not work the same way in this case. So the first problem with the more exotic Tesla systems is compatibility and a destructive effect upon modern electronics, along with a host of other undesirable byproducts. Musicians and others who use such light for shows, this is a popular thing you can see on YouTube, will need to be prepared to sacrifice their equipment and also expose themselves to dangerous forms of radiation that can suck the life force right out of them. These should not be considered toys. And I'm serious about the life force. I've watched this happen to people, and you can talk to people after they've been exposed to this. Different people respond differently. But prolonged exposure can be very dangerous to you. Tesla wireless communication is also related to this, but we have no time to cover that subject because it's really not being used at the time. I want to move now into more biological concerns. In my work, I often warn people about the safety matters, especially when working with batteries. I used to be a mechanic too, so I know all the dangers of batteries. I work with them every day. We're also concerned about magnets and electrical circuits. So I talk to people at my meetings, on the phone, wherever, warning them, be careful first. Safety is the first rule, as I tell my children. At Renaissance Charge, the top priorities with our products is to promote battery longevity and battery restoration if it needs to be restored. This is the first priority in the company. In the same way, we also want what is best for the environment. So naturally, if we reduce pollution and adding toxic batteries into the mix, we have a healthier environment and therefore healthier people. We've also spent much time helping people avoid exposure to EMFs. Microwaves and other radiations that can also harm them. Here's an example of a Gauss meter, and this measures the EMFs. But I'm not interested in talking about these concerns, as everyone has covered so much. I want to talk about these things that few or no people are talking about. Let's start by looking at something only a few people talk about with concern, the Tesla coil. You can readily find warnings on the internet about these, but I really do not see that the general public knows what they are exposing themselves to when getting them as toys or watching a light show when they are activated. Again, It's not so much of my concern to look at the things people are already showing, but other more serious mental considerations. However, we'll start by looking at just one page from Duke University. You can see the link, where they give the following physical warnings. Safety warning. Tesla coils and their support equipment are extremely dangerous. There are many known and unknown dangers associated with this type of equipment. So note the unknown aspect there. Some of the known dangers are as follows. High voltages and currents. Tesla coils use and produce extraordinarily high voltages and currents. Output voltages for small coils are typically in the range of 500,000 to a million volts. Currents of 10,000 to 5,000 amps may be present in the input circuits. Under no circumstances should one come into contact with these voltages and currents. In all cases, the voltages and currents used in Tesla coils are considered far beyond lethal levels. Now, what's interesting about this, I'm going to stop this midway, it's evident from so many people and even universities that they don't even operate the Tesla coils the way Tesla wanted to. And this is a big problem. There's a lot more focus on higher current and lower voltage. And that's not the way Tesla typically used his coils. And there's a lot of ignorance as to more dangerous frequencies, and we're going to get into that in a minute. Burns. Due to the high frequencies involved, Tesla coils can cause severe burns without the sensation of pain. These burns are typically very deep and need long-term medical attention. Now that is something to really pay attention to because you don't notice it. Long-distance arcing, again, like I said, Tesla coils by their nature produce electrical arcing which can travel unpredictably in any direction, can strike at considerable distances. These arcs can be very dangerous. Well, the arcs don't just travel from the coil, they can actually appear at a distance as well, like I said, in electronics, even on a microscopic level. Electromagnetic fields. Tesla coil type equipment produce extreme magnetic, electrostatic, and radio frequency fields. These may interfere with pacemakers and other critical electronic devices in the area of the local environment, like I said. These effects are unpredictable. They don't always happen. You get these little streamers, or big streamers, all of a sudden. Ozone. Tesla coil equipment produces large quantities of ozone, which is poisonous. In some degree, it's actually beneficial to you, supposedly. Anyway, I'll continue. Adequate ventilation must always be maintained. Ultraviolet light. Spark gaps used in Tesla equipment produce intense ultraviolet light. This light can burn the retina of the eye with ease. Always cover any exposed arcs. Just like in welding, people. Don't play with fire. Fire. Tesla coils can and have started a number of fires. They can arc to flammable objects with ease. Any fire extinguishing equipment must be rated for electrical fires, but still must only be used when the power is removed from this type of extremely high voltage equipment. Think about that for a minute. You can't put out electrical fires. They are just not stoppable. PCB oil. Although rarely used now, high voltage devices such as transformers, capacitors, may use oil containing PCBs. These substances can cause very serious and long-term health problems and fatal cancers. Explosions. Components used in Tesla coils can explode with great violence. High voltage capacitors especially can store a tremendous amount of energy and can fail catastrophically. Always wear eye protection and physically shield energy storage equipment. Energy storage. Tesla coil circuits can store lethal voltages long after external power sources are removed. Circuits can spontaneously become energized without warning. Power supplies and especially high voltage capacitors must be discharged before approaching this type of equipment. X-rays. Vacuum tubes, light bulbs, and other evacuated spaces will produce X-rays when exposed to high voltages. Radio frequency interference, like we talked about. Tesla coils always produce intense radio frequency interference. Electronic equipment damage. Tesla coils can easily destroy any type of electronic equipment in the area or connected through the common AC wiring. This includes computers, televisions, etc. Now, this is a Tesla coil I want to mention here. It's called a violet ray device, and they're considered quack devices. They really work, but I don't want to recommend them necessarily. They're good for getting rid of warts and supposedly solving all sorts of problems. Well, I got them for this research and I ended up using them, but now I am very cautious about such things. They have these glass tubes here that are gas filled, and they produce not an ultraviolet light, but violet light. So that's why they call it a violet ray. So they're over 100 years old, and they were based upon Tesla's patent, the ozone production. And they were just modified and used with handheld devices like this. And so what happens is there's a set frequency here, and it discharges this tube, and it lights up, and you can see that they sell them on eBay and so forth. So there is a concern here with using these. What I was getting at, actually, why I brought this up was when I use my little kilowatt meter and I plug this into the plug, it goes haywire. The whole screen doesn't operate properly, and that is just connecting to the AC side of this. And so you can see what they were saying in that article, end of the quote. So what is not mentioned is that Tesla coils and associated technology can be used with differing frequencies and harmonies to resonate and destroy most any objects of any size relatively easy. That is to what it would normally take to do that. Here we could look at Tesla's demonstrations of producing fairly large lightning storms in Colorado and New York, as well as his ability to create earthquakes the same sort of way. It's no joke, and it's not very hard to do these kinds of things. So it is a very big concern. These considerations alone no doubt create much concern with people who understand these things and their full potential. I do not need to enlarge upon what others have shared along these lines. You can look them up for yourself. But it is enough to ask yourself, why would scientists like Tesla introduce such things to the world to put it at so much risk? About 100 years ago, Tesla said that in the future, we would have what we now call smartphones, and every house would have a Tesla coil. Among several uses of this Tesla coil, which we have in our ignition systems, but this type of coil he was referring to, not this one. Among several uses would be to have a cold fire bath. Yeah, you heard me. Not a hot bath, not a water bath, a cold fire bath where our whole body is literally completely covered in a fire, cold fire, a strange fire that some may be concerned with. Millions of volts. And so you can see in the picture that I'll show here the rabbit and this man completely covered. In other pictures you can see Tesla covered in this cold fire bath. And that would, instead of using water, that would replace water. and would also rejuvenate ourselves. And maybe. The problem with this idea is that it's questionable what the long-term dangers would involve. And more importantly, there are a host of factors that could go wrong and could even cause death. This is no joke. I'm not somebody who's trying to suppress technology or anything like that. But we need to be very careful. And this is my whole point with this video that we're going to get into. My concerns about how Tesla coils can negatively affect us mentally will be covered shortly after we consider first how music can lift us up or bring us down and change our whole direction in life in extreme cases. It is not so much the wording in music, but everything else in music that really affects our spirits. Why? Can people be manipulated by music and frequencies? If the frequency of something is a main factor in how it functions or displays its phenomena, then altering frequencies from their normal or natural conditions can also affect major changes. Let me read that again. It's kind of compact. If the frequency of something, like we affect the frequency of a battery in a certain way to manipulate it for better charging. So if the frequency of something is a main factor in how it functions or displays its phenomena, then altering frequencies from their normal or natural conditions can affect major changes. I'm talking about biological things here. Who can judge what is biologically beneficial in this respect without careful long-term observations? There's much debate about this subject pertaining to just the tuning differences of 432 versus 440 in music. It's not my place to comment about it one way or another here. I only want to say for now that differing frequencies, harmonies, and rhythms indeed changes mood, as everyone knows with music. Enough studies have shown that plants and animals do experience very different responses to different types of music, where they flourish or wither, similar to orphan babies when touched compared with those who were never touched. Studies have shown the babies died off and they were never handled or touched. These show that there can be major adverse physiological and mental effects upon people and animals by a simple manipulation of frequency within a narrow band. What about at all levels, or higher and lower frequencies, higher voltages? We see matter change its temperature or form under some of these conditions. To many like Tesla, we enter into the realm of unlimited possibilities. We have the potential to create our own reality. I've met countless people all over the world who have that same zeal. But here I want to ask you, just what dangers do we expose ourselves to when being subject to such manipulations? Our track record reveals, our historic track record, the history of the race, reveals that a selfish motivation leads a lot of people to seek to manipulate others normally. And if there's an easier way to do that, then such people will resort to using such means, especially if they're easy. Further, selfish ambition blinds people from being cautious about potential dangers to themselves and others in the pursuit of immediate personal benefit. We often see how this can continue for many years and even centuries enough before objections are put forth to check these unhealthy practices. Smoking. Does anything go, or are we free to do whatever we want? What are we limited to by, and for what reasons? Do we have a creator who has given us a mandate to develop culture, learning, science, etc., for everyone's good, but at the same time put limits to that for our own good? Is this true? What are those limits? What is the fundamental ethic, and how do we judge if human action is consistent with that or contrary? Everyone automatically or instinctively judges each other by a basic standard that resembles such a God-given ethic. I've debated all types of people through all these universities across the land and on this subject, and everyone has an ethic like that. Whether they're a pure atheist denying all morality, they still have an ethic that they assume upon another person. I'm not going to get into that, but think about it. So what is the fundamental ethic? And how do we judge if human action is consistent with that or contrary? So everyone assumes this ethic, more or less modified from one person to another. The ethic is to be truthful at all times and to treat everyone with a love they also expect to be treated by others. The golden rule. How many things are implied by the attributes and relations of being truthful? Many things are implied by the attributes and relations of being truthful or loving. Being honest, impartial, thorough in investigation are implied in such things. In fact, I published a book 1,300 pages long, republished, an old classic, that is all about the attributes of love and selfishness. Look it in the links. My point in this is that we need to be cautious with our research and what we expose ourselves to, as we are vulnerable creatures, easily manipulated and even self-destructive. We have been given limits in the way of ethical boundaries to protect us from harming ourselves and others. When people remain ignorant of this, they can open up Pandora's box and create destructive forces in the world for personal selfish benefit under the guise of good to mankind. An example is nuclear energy development with its accompanying arms race and untold pollution to the world as perhaps the most serious threat to our planet, as well as being totally unnecessary. And yet the most serious threat is not the mere discovery of such powerful potentials, but rather the unchecked pursuit of anything that may be possible without a healthy appreciation and submission to the divine laws given us to protect ourselves from destroying ourselves. Again, the unchecked pursuit of anything, of the unknown. This is the most dangerous thing that has ever befallen us in history. Were the biblical stories of such major accounts as the fall of man, the flood, and Babel, whether you accept them as history or not, recorded in numerous cultures in their earliest recorded history? Were they merely to put people under some slave yoke, as many skeptics would have us believe? Were we given these as warnings to protect us against self-manipulation, mass destruction, or even demonic influence? Whenever people have abandoned the basic instinctive, divinely given ethic or natural law, and have massed together under selfish instinct, they have oppressed each other and destroyed each other and the world. These primal stories are there to put caution in us not to go down the same path. But in our day, ethics are not a priority, and there is very little accountability in such matters to put a check on people in such ways. I don't hear it anywhere. As a result, we race towards the selfish end of the highest efficiency, of highest pleasure, with increasing disregard for personal health and well-being and that of others, as well as an increasing disregard for honest and rational development. That is, education is more and more focused on learning and memorizing facts, rather than on the proper foundation of learning how to honestly evaluate facts of existence. To know the laws of evidence even. I once traveled for a year across the country to numerous universities and colleges and talked with students all day long as a missionary, handing out my books for free. And one time, the biggest crowd that I ever had the opportunity to speak, I asked, one of the questions I asked was, how many of you have studied logic? And out of about 2,000 people, there's only a few hands that went up. And I asked them, when did you start studying logic? And they said, in the last year or so. So how is it that people can go through their whole education, many don't even go to college, and never learn how to think for themselves? They only learn what. So the problem is people don't know how to evaluate what they're told. So as a result, we're taught what to think without restraint, without a healthy development of virtue to limit the temptations of selfishness. The masses will rush headlong into destructive endeavors, and then we have what I'm calling a subterfuge culture. A culture of people that are either credulous or incredulous, or rather both. That is, they believe in things naively before a good sufficient reason. And or they disbelieve the obvious because they are trained to pick and choose their own reality. These seemingly opposite mentalities often exist in the same person at the same time, and both are displayed when people depart from the truth in honesty. They can be experienced at the same time because while you want to believe something to be true, and thus close your eyes to caution and thorough investigation, you thus disbelieve anything contrary while engaging in confirmation bias. Let me tell you an example that I used to tell these university students about prejudice. This is what we're talking about, training a culture of prejudice. So, I said to them, what if I called you up and you were in your dorm room and I asked you, what is in the room? And you would go and do a 360 and you would tell me about the desk over there, the chair over there, and the bed over there. And then that's what you reported. So I was under a different impression of what was in the room because naturally you chose not to look at the mess over there, the clothes over there, and the garbage over there, and the paperwork over there. You didn't fully describe the whole room because you didn't want me to know about the mess. This is a matter of selecting your own reality and misrepresenting the truth. So confirmation bias, on the other hand, is looking at a fact and saying, oh, this supports my belief, even though it equally supports an opposite belief. It consists with both. Confirmation bias selects what it wants. It justifies itself. It's not thorough, it's not fair. Now, people put up a big fuss about personal freedom and the historical abuses of organized religion. I heard all about it all my life. And I was against it myself. But how many of these people are superficial and miss the deepest problems at the root of their objections? While I may agree with many facts such people present, I find many of these people full of rage in these matters, missing the underlying problems that actually create the evils that destroy personal liberty or create systems of organized manipulation. As it is not real religion itself that people object to, even as everyone has their own core set of beliefs or religion, but it is the departing from such obvious truth and selfish manipulation of others that these people actually object to. Again, the root problem is that people are not only distracted by unimportant facts and pastimes, so that they are ignorant of what is important for them to know, but most importantly, they are conditioned to be ignorant of virtue, and thus conditioned to be selfish, unjust, and are unable to honestly evaluate ethical issues. Think about the education system today, all over the world, the common education system. Here's your facts as we give them to you. Here's your fun. Be distracted by that, be distracted by this. Don't figure out the truth for yourself. So they can't evaluate. They don't care about morals. Every man to themselves. Let's go play football. This is analogous to the Wall-E movie, where mankind no longer walks and thus can't even walk anymore, and develops the accompanying evils associated with going against the way we were made to live. It is not religion that is evil, but these kinds of destructive conditionings of selfishness and blind disregard to truth and virtue that is the problem in this world. And if there is no absolute virtue or truth, everything's relative, then life is but a mockery, and every man is left to devour each other as they wish. Might is right. Do as thou wilt. Furthermore, true liberty is based on such fundamentals, and personal freedom is indeed limited to the good of others and natural law. For how can one person have the absolute right over all others to do whatever they want? It would be fine if there was nobody else in this universe, but there's more than one we have to share. Or is might right? And do we kill everybody? Is that how it works? Freedom is limited to what is right under the circumstances. Right is a big word that has to be carefully understood. And it's vastly important to understand that checks and balances occur in a more or less harsh way when society is more or less intelligent and virtuous, or virtuous. I'm going to write a chapter on government, which will probably be one of the hardest. And what I've often said to people is, we get the government we deserve as a collective whole. A righteous man doesn't deserve a harsh government, but the society as a whole will get the kind of government suited for it. Harsher government for harsher people. When people are more virtuous and intelligent, they don't need regulation as much. There's a lot more faith in society. There's a lot more trust. There has been revivals of religion in New York State for a long period of time, 100 years ago, where the police had nothing to do. They played in a band. Everything changed in society for good. There wasn't the need. Sure, there was administrative things, but things worked a whole lot better. As things get worse, what do you expect when the mob rules? How do you control it? Or how can an unreasonable and selfish people be reasoned with or controlled from destroying everything? So the first step in fixing what's wrong with this subterfuge culture is to really understand what is fundamentally wrong with it and reverse this one person at a time, rather than be distracted and hopelessly fight against mistaken in the wrong place. Why? Do you want to fight and correct the system? Then fix yourself first. Then you will see clearly to help your neighbor the right way. You might have heard that before. Stop looking to facts as the solution. Instead of consider what is implied in being virtuous and absolutely honest. How many people are crippled by fear in this conspiracy mindset? I'm talking about not only the conspiracy theorists, But those in mainline who also believe in their conspiracy, crippled in fear, missing the point. These people tracing the evil of one party against another. These people following these elite people of the world, wondering all their evil actions to almost hysterics or paranoia. What good is it really doing them? Okay, you've learned some facts. Are you fixing the problem or are you missing the point? Are you participating? Are you really falling for the trap, as I mentioned before? Have you fallen into a trap of ignorance and vice? Have you become angry and want to have a violent response? Why not change yourself? Truly become logical and influence your neighbor for good in that way. One person at a time will change this world. So what are the lessons we have been given from these three ancient primal sources? This brings me to a major concern. Where did the first evil suggestion come from? And just what was taking place in that? That relates to people today in scientific research and personal decisions to accept new changes to our culture and technology. How does that relate? The first fall, the first suggestion. The account informs us of an otherworldly influence that encourages our first parents to disregard the clear limits in life and set up for our good and adopt the selfish principle to do as thou wilt and pursue whatever you wish without limitations and against the truth and the highest kind of authority. Think about that. An adoption of this attitude opens up one to any form of evil and leads to the utter disregard of all others in this pursuit. We got the story right after of Cain and Abel. And this is the main concern. Look at Nimrod, who is the founding emperor of this world. First emperor. What kind of tyranny did he set up? All these major religions coming from that whole storyline. An adoption of this attitude opens you up. And this is the main concern I have for people like Tesla and others who give the world no example of having any caution to exposing themselves and others to potentially harmful effects of their research, such as X-ray radiation as example, which he did with Mark Twain and others. And furthermore, with new advancements, so much more checks should be put in place to prevent new technologies from being used to bring about more evils than good. I'm not for tons of regulation, but something needs to be done about these things to protect us. With Tesla and so many others, there was no regard for this, and their example encourages millions to do the same today and race towards the newest discovery of the greatest efficiency, of the highest pleasure, life products, rather than caring about what is most important in life. Think about it. A zeal for new discovery, the American dream. This attitude is really reckless, and I know how of many people that have seriously harmed themselves in many ways. For example, there are many Russians who have exposed themselves to great radiation with working with giant Tesla coils, and now they're either dying or have died already. Many people in this country are experiencing cancers, and we have these conspiracy theories about, oh, they were killed by the government. Well, maybe they killed themselves, and who do you think put them in harm's way? The very inventors that they're trying to copy many times. There needs to be cautions put to people first, people. And while there are those who warn of dangers here and there, As there are various laws and regulations set in place to prevent people from harming themselves or others, I really do not find any voice out there that really goes after the heart of the problem here. I see a need to show how we live in a culture of subterfuge and deceit, and there is only one way to fix it, or to be free of it, and that is to walk in the truth at a fundamental level. This will be my attempt to do in an ongoing book about all aspects of our culture. Now, as for my concern about Nikola Tesla, I could list all the harmful inventions he published to the world, but this is not really my point in this. For I'm not looking at this as a matter of what material contributions were beneficial, as many things he did could be listed, or bad, such as the death ray, earthquake weapons, machines, etc. But I'm concerned more with his legacy that promotes an irrational, unsafe, mad rush into the unknown territories, at the risk of the welfare of others and even the whole world. This is worse than naive, to so madly rush into things and also to adopt a philosophy that blindly ignores the selfish ruling principle of the masses and rulers, and suppose that such dangerous weapons and technologies be disclosed to the public or scientific community or authorities, and not result in further evils being inflicted upon mankind than if such discoveries were not given. Really, what's better, guys? Should he have just not disclosed these things? Now we have to pick up the pieces. This is my main concern, and causes me to now pull away from any promotion of Mr. Tesla as someone to follow. Furthermore, there are real concerns about the source of his ideas. Many skeptics of Tesla have rightly pointed out that he lived in a context of many great minds, and was actually taught many of the ideas in school, which were even discovered before he was born. That he is presently viewed by many as having discovered first. In my reading of Tesla's own words, I realize the truth in that, and readily see him refer to those who came before him, and also those working on the same things that he was working on. There seems to be a large, credulous, overbelieving cult following Tesla that is mostly ignoring the details of his complex times, his complex personality, and tends to make sweeping claims about his originality and conspiracy theories around him. Now, I believe there clearly was some conspiracies, and he was original in many ways. I'm all about giving credit where it is due, but what he actually gave us is less than what many of these suppose, and certainly is nothing compared to the evil he inspired by his mad example of reckless diving into the unknown. So what other influences was Tesla under? Well, Tesla had some familiarity with Christian belief, his father and family, and he studied theology, and had some measure of appreciation for it. He was clearly a pantheist in belief and practice. Pantheism is the belief that ultimate reality is everything. That as theists believe God is everything, and a personality supersedes all of nature and is self-existent. Pantheism believes everything that exists is one, and there is no real division. Division is an illusion. Pantheism is a progression of that, and sucking back in. There's many views of pantheism, but it's all ultimately pan, or one. Tesla was clearly a pantheist, if you can look throughout his whole electronic career. He made numerous references to Eastern pantheistic philosophy as matters of fact. For example, boiling everything down to being light. He's very appreciative of Hindu philosophy and Eastern philosophy. While this subject is certainly not simple to understand, my concern is not merely with his philosophy of the ultimate, but more of what he opened himself up to as he revealed such a gateway to his intuitions. He had this profound ability to visualize something, and he could always make it just as he visualized. But what was the source of his inspirations, his visions? Jesus was someone Tesla had the highest regard for, and Jesus said, we were to judge people by their fruit. I've examined how Tesla left a legacy of the most destructive nature, so I now judge this fruit to be bad. Naturally, I question, what is the source of this great insight into unknown realities? What gave this insight? Was it the same sort of access that led our first parents to take a similar reckless course of action and run headlong into selfish, uncautious pursuit of hidden knowledge and forbidden limits for personal gain? Gnosticism, occult knowledge, secret knowledge, public doesn't know about it, hidden mysteries. In opening up the mind to seek spiritual oneness with nature itself, with this admittedly unguarded attitude and reckless agenda, could Tesla have allowed himself to be influenced by unvirtuous direction? Many people in history have experienced such illumination under such circumstances, which have resulted in much personal success, while also creating destructive results to the present culture. How many in popular culture have admitted to adopting a spirit guide, selling their souls to the devil? You can laugh about it, but suddenly, instantly, rising to the top of the charts. And what kind of influence are they giving to society? It's something at least to be considering. Enough people have done that in the music industry alone to make you even evaluate this as something that has real evidence. All right. My point is not so much to give the rise to the possibility of demonic influence under such circumstances. Hear me out. But rather to look at the reckless attitude itself and what resulted from it. We can all agree about that, even if we have difference of beliefs in the spiritual realm. If it is true that there are such forces, then we ought to be all the more careful about testing truth in action. Because of these concerns, I have not only turned away from Tesla, but also away from others in this research in different areas of the world, so as not to be involved in a slippery slope into the mad rush of new discovery at any cost. Some people are clearly ingenious and can do amazing things. And I leave behind a chance of a lifetime, an opportunity to make millions with such people. And I know about that intuition, and I know the temptation of it. I'll tell you one thing, on just a purely natural level, if you water fast for a while, your mind will become a whole lot clearer. But be careful of what influence you open up yourself to. Anyway, but these kind of people admit the source of their knowledge to be the hidden nature, admittedly inspired by the same source, opening up the same sort of doors to our first parents. Yes, I've had such a person tell me that demonic influence was good. To them, the effect upon mankind back then at the first fall of man was liberation. And their desire today is to continue towards the same end. Can you imagine the idea that mankind committed sin and brought on misery? This was a good thing to them, so long as they have the idea of progressing in that. It's a delusion. This is no joke. even if one was mistaken in thinking they were being liberated by an angelic being, is nevertheless concerning that people would prefer and consider the abundance of evil and corruption as progress, if only they can excel in their discoveries of such hidden knowledge. This is the extent they get trapped into this whole discovery process. Of course, this man also denied that there is any difference between good and evil, or right and wrong, and that ultimate reality is both good and evil together. So the lack of personality in the ultimate existence, which we would call God, is both good and evil, the force of Star Wars. Evil thus becomes a necessity, just like in the plot. Without the evil, there would be no drama in the Star Wars drama. And in essence, it's an illusion, because in the end, it's necessary, it's a good thing. It develops both directions, the yin and the yang. Life then is a game where you do what you want with no limitations. Naturally, I can't support that in any way. Then you also have those who seek a name for themselves, copying others, and create a cult following with stories of being held at gunpoint by the government over supposedly promoting things that would benefit mankind. But do we know if this really happened, or what the real issues were? What if there was a visit because the public was put at risk when people received a product with radioactive material in the transistors that were glowing? They were exposed to it. I will not be involved with people who do such things either. But my whole point is that Tesla paved the way for this kind of practice and these kinds of people, even as they claim him and others like him as their mentor. Oh, no big deal to risk harm to a few or to the world because I want a name for myself, or for the world to have some temporary fleeting advantage. I really don't see many people seeing this, even though it is self-evident when you think about it. But it's time for someone to draw attention to it. I've been working in this research for 13 years and have conversed with tens of thousands of people constantly, but have not seen any real voice of caution in this respect. Thus, millions of people are exposed to harm in even relatively simple matters because they seek to experiment without caution and copy those they think have discovered something, while such people did not properly warn them of the real dangers. I'll say one more thing about Tesla in regards to people. Tesla's reckless attitude in research or towards those he exposed was similar to his beliefs in sterilizing people and the monstrous idea of entities deciding who is a fit person to reproduce. On February 9th, 1935, at the end of his life, he wrote, "The year 2100 will see eugenics universally established. In past ages, the law governing the survival of the fittest roughly weeded out the less desirable strains. Then man's new sense of pity began to interfere with the ruthless workings of nature. As a result, we continue to keep alive and to breed the unfit. The only method compatible with our notions of civilization and the race is to prevent the breeding of the unfit by sterilization and the deliberate guidance of the mating instinct. Several European countries and a number of states of the American Union sterilize the criminal and the insane. This is not sufficient," he says. "The trend of opinion among eugenists is that we must make marriage more difficult." Well, people don't get married anymore. "Certainly no one who is not a desirable parent should be permitted to produce progeny." Who's not a desirable parent in Tesla's mind? Him, who is never a parent himself? "A century from now, it will no more occur to a normal person to mate with a person eugenically unfit than to marry a habitual criminal, end quote. Now, I ask you, how far is this removed from selecting who is fit to live? There really is no step removed from that. Who is fit? Who said those sort of things? Nietzsche, the man who went insane the last 13 years of his life. Hitler, who followed his philosophy. Tesla, who said at the same time as Hitler. So those who count Tesla as their hero need to rethink everything in this light, not merely the inventions he disclosed, but his personal philosophy and example. Take a step back from the mad gold rush mentality or letting curiosity expose you to harm. Look at the big picture also. I have always cautioned those under my influence to be careful about working with batteries or magnets or electricity. But now it is time to take this to another level of concern. So I will continue to stress these kinds of things, however unpopular it may be, in the hope that it will save people from hurting themselves. This is the major theme of my upcoming free book about subterfuge culture. It is to cover the same sort of concerns in all parts of our culture with a practical and positive solution. Each chapter is about matters that I have personally been affected by and feel compelled to say and do something about. I may not be qualified or the best suited, but no one else has bothered to do this yet. Judge me for my mistakes or failures to mention things, but don't miss the main point. That is my only hope in this. Thank you for watching.